Hey folks, how are you doing today? I'm just checking out some stuff here. Actually, let me jump over. Here. I'm doing a new thing. Well, I'm trying a new thing, try to stream to multiple platforms at once. So I've never actually done this before. So just bear with me. I'm just checking to make sure everything looks good so far. It looks like the stream's coming in good on all different platforms. So I'm streaming to YouTube, Facebook, and all of those places. So trying something new here, see how it goes. Pretty cool. All right. So what I want y'all to do for me is, first of all, let me know if you can hear me clearly, if you can hear the keyboard nice and loud. Just make sure the audio quality is good. Drop in the comments where you guys are tuning in from. Shout out to France Javier from Philippines. Am I saying that correctly? Drop in the chat where you guys tuning in from. And, while the others jump on, this is our live Q&A. One of the things I'm trying to do going forward is to see if I can run a Q&A session once a month. Just to get to connect with you guys. Because I don't always get to do that. The channel now has, something like 217,000 subscribers. And I just want to thank y'all for the support. So there's just so many people that I don't know, people from around the world, and I really appreciate you guys. So these monthly or every other month live session that I'm doing is really just a chance to get to connect with you guys. And get to answer questions in real time that I probably wouldn't have gotten a chance to do otherwise. Zimbabwe in the house. Greetings from So come on in, folks. Come on in. We're gonna be having some fun here today and just connect. I'm probably gonna be online for about an hour and 20 minutes, hour and a half, depending on how things are going. I'll try to really hang out with you guys. So we have currently on YouTube 19 viewers. So come on in. We're also streaming to Facebook, to my Facebook page, and to the Facebook group. For those of you who don't know, we have a Facebook group. It's kind of same thing, similar thing as a Facebook page. So we're streaming to all those places at once. trying to see how many people we got over at. We got 16 folks on Facebook, 19 on YouTube. Let's see how much we got in the Facebook group. Facebook group. We got one person in the Facebook group, so I'm sure that will increase over time. So again, welcome. It's a pleasure to always get a chance to hang with you guys, to ask questions, get real-time answers, and feedback from me. So, we're gonna jump into it, but let's do some housekeeping first. So that we can get the chat streamlining in a nice way. Because what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna be pulling questions from the chat. Now, as people come in the chat, they're going to drop messages, and, sometimes we may have people in the chat talking about stuff that may not be related to the video, and that's completely fine. I want you guys to hang out in the chat and comment and talk and all of that stuff. However, if you have a specific question that you want me to address, first thing, start with the word questions. So as I'm scrolling the chat, that's what I'm going to be looking for. The word question followed by your questions that you want to ask, okay? So that will help me to stay on top of things so I can visually easily grab the questions from just the regular chat running. Second thing is, bear in mind that this is an impromptu live Q&A session. I'm not teaching a full course. So tailor your questions to be concise. So if I have to read and try to figure out what you're trying to ask, I'm probably going to skip that question. So make your question as clear and concise as possible, but also make sure that your question is realistic, something that I can easily explain and demonstrate if needs be in a minute or two. So, because I'm trying to get as many questions in as possible. Every time I do a live, there's always tons of questions that I'm not able to address. And that's fine, because there's so many of you. But the shorter the questions, the more concise the question is, the more questions I can get through, right? So again, think of the questions you want to ask. See if you can structure that question in like a line or two, right? Get to the point. And again, make it realistic. So not too complex, something that I can easily get to, demonstrate. All right, so again, welcome folks to our live Q&A for September. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to try to do more of these Q&As at least once a month going forward. And again, these are just really just an opportunity for me to connect with you guys and to answer your questions, all right? So I'm scrolling. You can start posting your questions. And another thing I would mention is to try not to be too spammy. Give other people an opportunity to ask questions. So don't just be spamming the chat with your question. Welcome, Sam from Nigeria. White Sun from Zambia. And Charles says, Warren, I just want to say you have really influenced my keyboard playing since day one. Well, thank you, my brother. I'm glad I'm able to do that. I don't have much questions. I just want to say God bless you for being a blessing. The best tutor on YouTube. Much love. Charles watching from Ghana. Man, it's a pleasure. Thank you guys. Questions, comments like these, really keeps me going. It's like fuel, right? It motivates me and make me want to continue to do the stuff, because I've been on YouTube since 2014 and it can get a little bit burnt out sometimes, trying to come up with new videos and ideas. It's a full-time thing, and so just knowing that there are people out there on the other side that really appreciate that and aren't afraid to voice that goes a long way. So thank you. So we got our first question here question here from Josephat from YouTube. And he says, how can I change my song played in a major key to play it in a minor key? Use an example of a hymn. So before we can change the tonality, that's what we call it. When we're changing a song from a major key to a minor key, we're changing the tonality. Before you can change the tonality, you also have to change the melody. Because you have to bear in mind that the melody, if it was written in a major key, you can't then just decide you're going to put it in a minor key without altering notes of the melody. Because the melody is going to be based on that major key. Let's take Amazing Grace, for example. So Amazing Grace in a major key would be like this. Let's take that bit. Now the first thing we have to do, what if I wanted to play the same Amazing Grace in C minor? We have to check all the melody notes and make sure that we're altering it to introduce these minor notes. So a minor scale, we're going to do a harmonic minor, would be this, a C harmonic minor. By changing the tonalities, the melody is going to sound different. So now I would have Amazing Grace. Doing this on the spot. I've never done this before. So that's my attempt of how you can change a song tonality from major to minor. It all really depends on the melody. Now, you also then have to convert the number, the chords, to minor. So like in the Amazing Grace, we know we're going from a 1 to a 4. So in the minor, you go from a 1 to a 4 still, but you got to keep in mind that now that 4 is minor. You know, so all of that. You got to change the melody first, and then you change the chords tonality based on that minor key. But it's a cool exercise. You can do that with almost any song. Change the tonality. I actually like that sort of minor version of Amazing Grace. It's a cool vibe. So that's definitely something y'all can play around with. Keys String from Facebook says, I'm really having problems playing blues. What's the secret? There's 2 secrets to playing blues. Dominant 7th. 99% of your chords need to be dominant 7th. And 2, you need to be utilizing the blues scale, right? So again, if I'm just playing a 1 to a 4. Basic 1 to a 4. If I want it to sound bluesy, turn both chords into a dominant 7. So then you have, see, dominant 7 chords. Now a third factor to make it sound bluesy is swinging. Swinging is a sort of jazz concept. Actually, it's really a blues concept because blues came before jazz. But swing really kind of became mainstream in jazz. But, it's where we play around with the rhythm. So instead of straight. This would be playing it straight. Swinging now is can you hear the difference? So this is swing. Now, you know, you start to do little licks based on the blues scale. So that's just 3 tips as to how you can start to introduce that bluesy style of playing. Dominant 7th chords, utilization of the blues scale for improv and licks, and swinging. Get that rhythmic swing. Great question. But again, for those of you who are just coming in for clarification, just so I can easily see the chat, start your questions with the word question in front of it, so I can easily tell a question from just, you know, someone making a comment. France says how to practice walking bass in the left hand. The best way to practice walking bass is based on scale and chord degrees. I actually have a great course, not a course, it's a YouTube video I did years ago on how to walk bass to any progression. And I think that's a very, very important, very useful video based on this question. So I'm pulling up YouTube here. Let me see, I'm gonna post the link in the chat. I'm gonna post the link to this video in the chat. It's called 6 tips for walking bass line over any chord progression. And I'm pulling up that video here, and I'm going to post it in the chat because I think the time would be better spent for you to review this video opposed to me trying to regurgitate everything that was taught in this video. So France, I'm posting that in the chat now. So there's the link I just posted. Click on that, and you know, you can save the link for when you're available to review. All right, let's keep the questions rolling. Welcome, Danielle from Rio de Janeiro. Question from David on YouTube. David says, can you add a bluesy or jazzy spice to whatever melody you want? Or it has to have a spicy rhythm? No, you can craft anything to sound bluesy or jazzy. You just have to understand the characteristics of what constitutes something to sound bluesy, jazzy, and spicy. Oftentimes it's the chords, the use of the chords. By extending the chords, you start to get into that jazzy territory, messing with the rhythm, just like how I demonstrated with that bluesy thing, messing with the rhythm. And then the way you utilize licks and lines. So if we're doing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, right? C. Then we take that song and I kind of want to jazz it up. So first thing I can start to do is stuff like, you know, major 7 or major 9. So I'm sort of spontaneously reharmonizing the chord there. And for those of you who've been watching the channel for a while, you know that reharmonization is a whole different topic. So I can't really explain how I know what chords to use in this video. It would kind of take too long. But that's how you could just take a song and you can start to... So in this style, I was thinking more like a ballad version of Twinkle Twinkle. So I could take it all kind of places. So to spice up any song, to make it jazzy, to make it bluesy, you got to be thinking about those three things. How are you going to use the chords? What type of chords are you going to use? And that's a whole different topic because we're talking about reharmonization right there, which often includes substitution, passing chords, all of that. How you utilize chords. Then how we're going to utilize rhythms. Because the rhythm is going to determine what style you're trying to go for. Or how we utilize licks and lines and runs. That's improvisation. So in other words, David, for us to spice up any song, we need to have an understanding of all of these concepts individually. Reharmonization, improvisation. Right? Combine them. You could take any song to make it sound however you want. Great question. Great. And again, just a reminder, start your questions with the word question, because that's what I'm going to be looking for as I'm scrolling the chat. One people says, I joined your membership and I really have improved massively in my music journey. Thank you, Warren. And that's just the pitch right now. For those of you guys who've been following me for a while, been on YouTube for a while, you're following a lot of different channels, and you're picking up bits and pieces of information there. That's all good and great. But if you've been stuck for a minute, what you're really looking for is structure. You can't really learn piano cohesively if you're just picking up bits and pieces of information here and there. That's really not a way to learn. I can play the way I play today because I spent 9 years studying music in university. I had structure, I had tutelage, I had expectations, I had directions. Now I'm not saying you have to go enroll in a university, but again, because I spent 9 years in university studying music, I have all the knowledge, and this is what I provide in my membership program. And I lay it out just as how, based on the information I was given in college, based on how the classes are structured, I basically modeled that, but in an online community, online program. So for those of you who are really looking for more structure, direction, to take your playing to the next level, I would highly recommend you check out Piano Lesson with Warren. It's a pretty affordable program if you were to compare to actual private lessons. It's super affordable. And you get direct access to me through just many of the different sort of live events and platforms and apps and all that stuff that we offer. So check it out, pianolessonwithwarren.com. Question from Josephat says, how do you come about the formation of turnarounds in your songs? Song use, like As the Dare. So turnaround, some songs naturally have a built-in turnaround. Some songs you can add it. The whole concept of why it's called a turnaround is that it takes you back to the top of the song. So a top of the song would be a chorus, beginning of a chorus or the beginning of a verse. We're starting over at a new section. So oftentimes you can do a turnaround there. The best way to do a turnaround, or the best progression to use as a turnaround, is either a 2-5-1, because 1 is the beginning of the turnaround, right? Or the beginning of that new section of the song. Or you can do a 6-2-5-1. But those are sort of the two things. So based on Josephat's example, like as the deer, let's go to an E flat, a different key. So as the deer panted for the waters of my soul, longing after thee. You see that long pause right there on the, and then the song starts again on 1? That's a perfect spot for a turnaround. And so when you're looking for turnaround possibilities in your songs, you're looking for places that have that long, open, almost pause, where there isn't anything happening vocally, the progression's not changing. You can slip in a 2-5-1. So in that case, we do the song again from the top. As the deer panted for the waters of my soul, longing after thee. You alone are my heart's desire, and I long to worship thee. You alone are my strength, my shield. You alone my spirit yield. You alone are my heart's desire, and I long to worship thee. Turn around. So that's just some ideas of how you can utilize turnaround. It's always a spot that you're looking for that takes you back to the 1. And you can do a 3-6-2-5 or just a 2-5-1 to take you there. Great question, Josephat. Question from God's Will on YouTube says, when thinking about reharming a song using the melody notes, how do I know what chords work perfectly as a substitution using that same melody at the top? So for those of you, if you haven't checked out my course yet on the 7 popular types of gospel passing chords, that would be a good place to start. Because when it comes to how do I know what chords will work, we don't just pull things out of thin air. We're sort of following rules. So are we doing something secondary dominant? Are we doing something 2-5 passing? Are we doing something tritone substitution? Are we doing something diminished chromatic passing? Are we doing something chromatic medians? Are we doing something minor chromatic passing? And are we doing something, I can't remember the 7th one right now. But it's usually something surrounding one of those, or variations of one of those passing chord technique. Because I like to think of passing chords and reharmonization as just alternate terms. Because oftentimes when we're utilizing passing chords, we're also reharmonizing the song. That's what we're doing. But we're using the concept of passing chord to get to that destination. So let me go back to your question to make sure I got everything perfectly. So, oftentimes it's not just the melody that we're thinking about when we're reharmonizing the song. we're thinking about the progression itself. And then we might alter the chord to fit the melody. You see what I'm saying? So if we go back to this demonstration of As the Deer. As the deer panted for. So the melody. If we take that bit, now I know that whenever I'm going from a 1 to a 6, I can do a 7-3 or a 2-5 passing to get to 6. So then all I have to do if I want to do it with the melody is to alter the chord to make sure that melody note is included. So then I end up with right? Right? Now sometimes you might see someone do, you know, it's the same thing. So we're or it can go, doesn't matter, all of these variations, but I keeping that melody. But before I was able to do all of that, I knew based on just experience and studies that I want to do a 2-5 passing. Now, what if I want to do a 2-5 passing going to a tritone sub to my 6? It sounds like this. Because that's my tritone substitution of G. So I'm using my G7, but then I'm also going to the tritone itself. So see, I know my melody is hanging out on that B flat, so when I'm doing that turn around, 3, 6, 2, 5, I'm altering my chord to make sure that B flat still becomes a part of the chord. Along it after thee, this becomes a flat 9. No, the sharp 9. Now it's the 7. Now it's the 11. But it's important to know, you might see me doing this almost instinctively and you're like, man, what is the secret? There actually, to be honest, there is no secret. I've been doing this for 20 years, so I have perfected the skill and the ability, which what allows me to think very fast in, seconds. I'm able to work this stuff out mentally. But I remember the days where I would have to sit and spend time mapping out the stuff. And so that's really where it starts. Understanding the theory behind what's being done, and then just slowly work on it across multiple songs. Over time, you will get there to the point where it becomes more intuitive, where you can just hear it. So when you look at me playing all these other guys on YouTube and we're just re-harmonizing the hell out of a song, and you're thinking there must be some secret that these guys have unlocked that allows them to do it in the moment, it's time. It's time that allows us to do it. Every guy you see on YouTube doing that stuff, if you check it, these guys have been doing it for 20 years or more. That's not something you just map out in a month and now you're this reharm god. It takes time, and that's what I want to relay to you guys. Step 1, you got to understand the theory. There are rules to how these things work. And once you understand those rules, then you need to go practice those rules, right? Because it's an art, which means there are a lot of variations you can do with it. But if you don't understand the why behind these things work, then you're really kind of just making stuff up, and you might hit or miss, come up with something cool, but you're not able to do it consistently across multiple songs because you really don't understand the underlying rules about passing chords and reharmonization. So again, it's stuff like this I cover over at pianolessonwithwarren.com, my membership program. I have dozens of song tutorials, all ranging from beginner to advanced. So you see the progression, how I play the song as a beginner, how I play as an intermediate, and how I play as an advanced with all the crazy chords. And all of this is broken down, and there's chord charts and lead sheets and MIDI files and video tutorials, because you really need to see this stuff across multiple songs before it starts to click, before you start to hear it. You can't just work it out on one song. It needs practice, it needs understanding, and it's best to do that in the form of some form of a progressive tutorial. So again, it's not just hit or miss, because I could give you a video tutorial of the advanced version of a song, and you might sit there and painstakingly learn it over the course of a month or a week or 2 weeks. But do you really understand how I got there, how I got to this place where all these chords now are in the song? And so by seeing the beginner's version and the intermediate's version, that's what allow you to then start to see the difference. Like, okay, so this is the beginner, this is the advanced. Now I can see the things he's adding to take a song from beginner to advanced. It's important for you to be able to see that separation. And sadly to say, that's just one thing you're not going to get on YouTube, is that progressive sort of view. You need to be able to see that. So check out pianolessonwithwarren.com. Let's take a question from So on YouTube, doctorally, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, says how to play all major scales and minor scales. At this point, my brother, that's actually the easiest thing. I mean, there's so many YouTube videos you can do, just how to play a major scale. I have a course, free course on how to play a major scale, where I go through all 12 fingerings. It's really a fingering thing. And unlike all the other stuff, there really isn't much theory behind learning scale. It's just, it's muscle memory. This is something you just got to drill, and you can use it as a warm-up, 2 to 3 minutes every day. Just work on a scale, you know? And over time, it just becomes a part of your technique and your vocabulary. So scale practice is actually the easiest thing. You just got to learn the fingerings. I have free fingering charts you can download. Just go on my channel and type in major scales, and you'll see videos. I give free download of PDF with all the fingerings people can use. But really, that's something you want to get out of the way as soon as possible. Learn your major scales and your minor scales, both hands, right? Great. Question from again, Josephat says, just a reminder that you can use it in in hymn, in a funeral, for the tutorial you put up a few weeks ago. I'm not sure I understand this question, Josephat, so you can probably rephrase that question. Okay. Question from Morris from Uganda. He says, when do I apply blues scale? You apply a blues scale when you're trying to make your playing sound bluesy. Now, it's important to note that by utilizing blues scale, the song's going to start sounding bluesy. It's like if you're cooking. If you want barbecue chicken, you got to use barbecue sauce with the chicken, right? If you want curry chicken, you got to use curry powder, right, in the chicken. So you can't say I want barbecue chicken, but I'm going to be using curry powder. It's not going to work. So in the context of a song, if you're playing something more CCM that is sort of just calm, you can't then just out of the blue start using blues scale. Because the whole nature of CCM is that it's not bluesy, contemporary Christian music, right? And so it's important to know style, understand, does this style of music that I'm playing requires or works with a bluesy touch, a bluesy sound? If not, you can't, right? So utilizing a lot of this stuff is understanding context. And that's it. So if you're playing a song that you find that, wait a minute, I'm naturally using a lot of dominant seventh, then that means blues scale is welcome, because that's one of the core characteristics of blues is dominant seventh chords. But if you're doing something more R&B, that is a lot of major seventh and the kind of smooth silky stuff in minor seven, and then you start just using random blues scale, again, it's going to be like you're trying to do barbecue chicken but you're using curry powder. It's not going to work. So first, understand the context and the genre and the style of the song you're playing before you can determine, is blues required for this? If not, it's going to sound very wrong. Question from Rachel. Rachel says, to play songs by ear, I use knowing scales, diatonic scales, and chord progression knowledge. Is there anything else that helps? Yes. Vocabulary. Chordal vocabulary. And chordal vocabulary, you build your chord vocabulary through transcription, right? The ability to sit, listen to a song, while at your keyboard and figure out the chords. That's what we call transcription. And by doing that with just random songs, you don't have to be playing a song or learning a song to transcribe the song. Transcription is a whole different exercise of practicing. One of the things we offer over at pianolessonwithwarren.com is a transcription club, where every week we go through a new song and we learn how to transcribe the chords. So by doing that, you're building your chordal vocabulary. Because a lot of people think ear training is just the ability to hear a chord. But how does one get to the point where they can just hear a chord? It has to be based on your vocabulary. If it's a chord you've never played before, you've never analyzed before, that means it's not in your vocabulary. So when you're listening to a song, if you can't listen and tell what chords you're hearing, it's because those chords are not yet in your vocabulary. So the best way to build your vocabulary is, one, through constantly transcribing a song. You should be transcribing at least 1 to 2 songs a month on the minimum side. The more you can transcribe, the better. And again, the ability is to just be able to figure out the chords using the aid of your keyboard, because we're not saying you're just going to sit there and just try to guess, because transcription is not guessing. There is a process to transcription as well, steps that you can follow. All of this stuff I lay out over at pianolessonwithwarren.com. I have a downloadable PDF about how to transcribe a song, the steps and the mental things you need to be going through. And by going through that process, you start to learn about the art of transcription. You start to learn about how songs are analyzed. And all of this is how we play by ear. So a lot of people who struggle to play by ear is because they don't understand song structures, chord analysis, and just tendency of how progressions work, chord vocabulary. You know, by knowing that a dominant seventh naturally wants to resolve up a fourth. There's just so many things regarding chord theory and chord analysis, chord vocabulary. And those things need to be practiced and studied regularly before it becomes a part of your vocabulary. But again, if you've never done this before, how do you know where to start? It's not something you're going to learn on YouTube. So again, Piano Lesson with Warren, you can learn a lot of that stuff. But Rachel, understanding the diatonic scale and diatonic chords is definitely a good place to start. We just can't stop there, because you're going to find that you're limited in how fast you can learn a song and how well you're able to play a song with just those two points. You're going to need additional knowledge. But that's a good question, Rachel. My brother says, I'm sorry, I'm not able to pronounce your name, so I'm not even going to try. How to run bass line in fast songs. Kind of go back to the question that Morris asked. First, you got to understand the style, the genre of the song you're playing, because the bass line is going to be different, right? Now, the only type of songs I can think about that require a fast bass line is sort of like traditional gospel songs. So if we're doing like a what a mighty God we serve, what a mighty God we serve, before him, and heaven and earth adore him. What a mighty God we serve. Ba 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 ba. Woo! Ba 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 ba. That's sort of more like traditional gospel. And so there are certain patterns that you can learn for traditional gospel style, kind of similar to jazz, right? Same concept would use for like a fast blues song. But if we're doing something more cultural, like for me being Jamaican, if we're doing something more like ska, if I'm doing the same song but in the style of a ska, before him, heaven and earth adore him. What a mighty God we serve. I also post a link in the chat. I think I may still have the link here. I can post it, where I talk about tips for walking bass line. Because a lot of the tips are going to be the same across multiple styles and genres. It's just how we utilize rhythms might change. So I'm going to post that link again here for you. Just post it. It's a YouTube video I did a few years ago about walking bass, and that will cover a lot of the important things you need. Question from Josh. He says, I play the piano at my church. They usually play Hillsong-style music, and I find the style quite boring. My brother, that's a whole nother conversation, because that's something I've been discussing for about 3 years now. And for those of you who don't know, I'm not a big fan of CCM. I'm struggling as a gospel musician because I've realized that most churches now have gone CCM. The once hardcore gospel churches, some of them now have a balance where they'll do some gospel and they'll do some CCM. Some churches have just gone full CCM. And you know, I don't want to bash any music style or anybody, but it's just part of my issue with CCM is I find the songs boring in that it doesn't present much of a challenge for me. Sitting there playing 1, 6, 2, 5 chords, every song pretty much has the same progression or a variation of the same chords and progression. I get musically bored. And I know that might sound strange to some of you guys. People might say, but oh, you should be going to church for worship, and you know, you shouldn't be going for entertainment. And I understand all of that. But you know, for someone like me who spent half of his life, you know, more than half of my life, studying music at a high level, that's not something you can just shut off, right? Like I said, I spent 9 years in university. 9 years. Doing nothing else but music. I've been in music and I grew up in church, so I've always been around music, but I didn't really start learning music until my teenage years. And so it's not something I can shut off. I remember being in church at 10 years old, and I would listen to the keyboard player, and you know, he'd play some chords that I'd just like, ooh. I didn't know what he was doing then. I didn't know they were called chords. I didn't know anything. But even at that age, my ears was always just in tune to music. And so it's not something I can just shut off. So yeah, I go to church for worship and all of that stuff. But if the music ain't grabbing me, that's not something I can ignore. Now, I'm not saying all CCM songs are like this. There are actually some really good written CCM songs. Even though the chords might be on the simple side, they're still well done. But again, when all the songs are like that, it's kind of like getting up every day and eating rice and chicken. You're kind of like, can I just get something else another day? And so that's where I sit. I know I'm going off on a whole rant now, but it's something I'm struggling with, you know, and I recently started attending this church, that I think I may eventually become the keyboard player there, because I haven't played for a church since 2020. And that's a whole nother discussion as to why. Part of it's because I moved to a different state and all of that stuff. But the other reason why I haven't really gone out is because I'm kind of trying to find a church where the music aligns with me. And I kind of find a church, the music's not bad, it's more CCM, but there's an opportunity for me to probably take over their music department. And if that happens, I'm gonna shake things up. I'm gonna bring back music that has more beef and potatoes to it, so to speak. But anyway, so I understand your plight when you say you find it boring. I definitely understand. So Josh is saying, would you know how to make the music more interesting without clashing with others? Yes. And that's something, it's a skill that I think a lot of musicians, guys like myself, have to learn. Or if you don't know how to do it, I know how to do it, but if you don't know how to do it, it's something to start learning. Because if you have to play 1, 6, 2, 5 for every song, there are ways you can introduce jazz chords and fancy passing chords without messing up the singer or even the rest of the musicians in the band. It does require a level of finesse. And that's something, especially for like 2024 coming up, I'm gonna try to look more into that. You know, I'm gonna try to pull more CCM style songs and show you how to reharmonize them without losing their essence. That's something I'm gonna try to do more of. I did one the other day. I love you, Lord. I don't remember who was singing that. Is that Bethel? I think it's Bethel music. So just look, I think I released that video about a month ago. Look at my playlist, you'll see it, where I say how to reharmonize CCM song. And I show you how I take that song, which is a fairly simple song, and I reharmonized it without it losing its essence. I feel like back then we had a lot more liberty with gospel songs to go, you know, I feel like it was more easier to reharm. The song lends itself naturally to that. CCM, you gotta be careful because the song is intentionally written simple. So you gotta just know, and this is why we go back and talk about, you gotta understand how passing chords are used and the type of passing chord you wanna use. Because that's gonna give you ideas as to, okay, I want to reharmonize this CCM song. It's going to give you ideas as to how you can do that, because now you know the different ways and techniques you can use. But outside of that, I'm right there with you, man, you know. And so it's going to be interesting with this new spot that I'm going, because this is something I've been working on for a while. How to take any song and reharmonize it without it losing its essence. I do this with hymns, I do this with CCM songs, whatever it is, because I get bored. I can't just sit there and play triads all day, every day. No, ma'am, no, sir. It's not going to work for me. So there is a way to do it. And I'm going to try to explore more of that stuff in the future. Because the thing is, you know, we have to move with the times, right? And so if most churches right now have gone CCM, we kind of just have to evolve and realize, okay, how do I utilize all this knowledge that I've acquired over the years, coming from the jazz world, the gospel world? How do I infuse some of that in my playing? There's definitely a way for that. And I think most people actually like that sort of gospel CCM fusion, right? So that's definitely something you can look at. Manuel from Facebook says, how do I know which level I am as a pianist? Or could you give me a checklist? I actually have an assessment, and it's a free assessment. I'm going to post a link here to give you guys an idea as to where you sit skill level wise, but also the things you need to know as a beginner, so you know if you're intermediate. Because a lot of people say I'm intermediate, and when they take my assessment, they realize, I guess I'm not intermediate. So I'm going to just pull up the link here. I'm gonna pull up the link here, and I'm gonna post the link to this assessment in the chat. because I'm streaming to multiple sources. My browser is a little slow today. Whew. All right, here we go. Let me see. All right, I got the link. Let me test something. All right, Manuel, so I'm posting a link in the chat. For those of you, click that link or save that link. It'll take you to an assessment that I provided. And the assessment is basically quizzing you on ear training, technique, progression, theory, and repertoire. I call those the 5 banks. If you want to be a very good, competent musician, you need to be firing in all 5 of these categories. Ear training is your ability to hear and understand what you're hearing. Technique is how efficient you are at the keyboard. Do you know your scales, arpeggios, blocked chord, broken chords? Progressions. If I were to call out random progression, play me 1, 6, 2, 5 in the key of F sharp. Can you do it without having to stutter or stumble? Can you play me a 3, 4, 2, 5 progression in the key of G? Go. Can you do it? So progression is about, checking your efficiency with progressions and chords. And then theory is just basically your overall understanding of how music works. And that covers a lot of the things we talk about: progression, chords, scale. If I say, write me the notes of F sharp major scale, can you do it? Write me the notes of B flat harmonic minor scale, can you do it? If I say, spell me a C dominant 7 chord, what are the notes in that? Can you tell me? So theory is just basically sort of like the grammar of music, And then repertoire is basically songs. How many songs can you play? Because a lot of people say they want to learn piano, or they're learning piano, or they've been studying piano for 2 years. And you say, play me a song, and they can't. Play me a progression for a song, and they can't. They're not learning songs. So my recommendation is that every person should be actively learning a new song every month, which means every year you should be learning at least 12 new songs in their entirety, at minimum. That's your repertoire. Your repertoire is where sort of the rubber meets the road. That's where you learn all the things I talked about before. Ear training, technique, progressions, and theory comes together when you're learning a song. So if you're not actively participating in these 5 categories of music, your development's not only going to be slow, it's going to be lopsided, right? We need to see if we can balance these so that my ear training is complementing my techniques, complementing my understanding of progressions, my theory, and my repertoire. And so like when you sign up for pianolessonswarren.com, we have a practice path app that covers each of these categories. Every day, there are different lessons in each of these categories for you to work on. And for those of you who also haven't downloaded my active ear training app yet, it's a 30 days free with that app. You type in active ear in any app store on a mobile device, and you can see the different types of exercises in that app that you can start to work on and quiz yourself, right? So that's some good stuff right there. Let's take a question from Ronald. Says, how do I do chromatic diminish to go to a 6-chord? Well, oftentimes there are 2 ways to do it. The first way is the diminish walk. And the second way is the chromatic diminish passing. So if I'm in the key of C, and I'm going to A minor, I can do a dominant passing with some diminish. You probably hear that one in song before. Right? So all I'm doing, I'm going to an E7, and then I'm walking up to get to that diminish. So F sharp diminish, G sharp diminish, and then that B diminish and come back down. So that's one way. And this is something you can practice. So this was an example going from C to A. What if I want to go from F to D minor? Same thing. You're going to go down a fourth, and that's the chord you're going to use. What if I want to go from 5 to 3? Same thing, but you go down a fourth, and that's the chord you're going to use as a dominant 7, and then walk. So that's one way. The other way, go back to C, is to approach ascending, go to the chord above your destination chord and descend chromatically. So if I'm on this C and I want to go to D minor, I can do, so I go up to E, then chromatic down diminish. And that works. I can do the same thing if I'm going from C to A, right? Now it's important to note that we're just talking purely theoretical here. And that's the important thing. You can't just always lift things theory-wise and then just slap it in a song. A lot of the times we gotta tweak things for it to work in songs. Why? Because we have to be cognizant of what's going on in the melody, what's going on with the timing of the song. Do we have enough time to slip in a series of diminished chords? So we always have to pay attention to those things. Because oftentimes that's the struggle when someone say, how do I match my theory to my song? And that's where sort of the artistic part comes in, because the theory might say you can use these diminished chords when going to a 6, but then you try it in a song and you'd be like, that doesn't sound right. Well, it has to match the conditions. The conditions have to be right before we can use this. Now, how do we tell if the conditions are right? That's something that unfortunately can't just be explained blanket. It needs to be a case-by-case situation where I look at each song, and part of this comes with experience, trial and error. Now, like I've been saying for the past 20 minutes, if you want to skip the trial and error, you might as well go to pianolessonwithwarren.com, because I have already dozens of examples of how I'm doing these things in songs. So you get to bypass the trial and error and just see practical examples across multiple songs. Then you can apply it to use for your own once you see how it's used. Great question though. All right, let's keep it rolling. Let's keep it rolling. Afro Soul says, I have been stuck at a certain speed on my right hand runs. How long does it take to get really fast during the runs, and how to improve your speed? So speed is one of those things that doesn't just come. You have to actively and deliberately work on it. Think of it this way. If you want to build some muscles in the gym and get strong, we can't just sit at home each day and be like, I hope I get some muscles one day. I hope I get strong. No, you kind of have to go to the gym and you have to do specific workouts to build muscle, to build strength. Like if you want to build your biceps, you got to do specific exercise that is based on building biceps. If you want to build your chest muscles, you got to do specific exercises to build your chest muscles. So if you want to build speed, you need to work on speed. So the best way to work on speed is through scale practicing, right? So if you're practicing, say, C major scale, and so what you need to do is monitor your speed. You can do this with a metronome or to a backing track. And each week, you try to practice your scale at a different speed, little by little. After a few weeks or a few months, the speed at which you're going to play, you were playing your scale 3 months before, is going to be very different than what you can 3 months later, right? And you continue to do that, improve and force yourself to practice at a different speed. Now, what I just demonstrated was practicing 2 hands. Oftentimes you guys might see me do one hand runs like, and you might say, that's the speed I'm talking about. You can practice that specifically. So one of the things I do sometimes is practice runs over chords. I might play the C sharp and then I go, right? And the goal is try to be clean. Now, if you're nowhere near playing your scale that fast, don't try to play it that fast. Use the method I spoke of first. Gradually increase your speed. And once you get to a nice speed, then you can say, then I'm going to try to practice that one hand thing. You can also practice it with your scale when you want to get that smooth sheen. So listen to it without the scale. Right? It's kind of choppy, but then when I do it with the pedal, see how it's cleaner? So there's a different way you can practice with pedal, without pedal, when you're doing this specific type of run. Another thing is with arpeggios. You guys might see me do, right? Same thing. I didn't just get up and practice it at that speed. Start slow. Get comfortable with your fingerings, right? Then you can start to gradually speed it up. And then you can practice it with the scale for that smooth sheen. And what I'm doing with my left hand is, so I do that. Start the left, take over the right. I haven't practiced my arpeggios in a while. I'm not as clean as I used to. But these things I spent years working on. Because in my early days, I was kind of obsessed with speed. I wanted to be able to play fast because I thought being able to play fast would make me a good musician. I couldn't be further from the truth. Speed has nothing to do with being able to play well. Another thing that allowed me to be able to develop this kind of technique and speed is because I'm classically trained. When I told you guys I spent 9 years studying music in college, that was 9 years studying classical piano. Bach, Beethoven, Chopin, all the crazy stuff. Wearing a suit and playing a 9-foot grand piano. That's what I did. Now, I'm not saying you have to go that route to be able to play this. I went that route because I got a scholarship to study classical piano, so I went and studied it. Not because it was my favorite genre of music. So I learned a lot about technique studying classical, and honestly, if I had to do it over again, I would go the same path, because there's just so much I learned being a classical pianist that I think it's good to know those things, and it definitely taught me a lot of discipline. Because for those of you who have dabbled in classical, you know it ain't no joke. Trying to learn a sonata can take months. So it takes patience and discipline and just consistency. But I've seen a lot of guys who can play as fast as I can and run as fast as I can who have never taken classical. But the path is still the same. You gotta make technique practicing a priority. You can't just ignore the scales and just want to focus on chords. You gotta practice your scales, right? I can take a few more questions. I know, guys, I know we've been online how long now? Let me check. Yep, hour and 10 minutes. I wanted to do an hour and a half, but I don't think I'm going to be able to make it because I'm looking at the time and I have some other things that I have to get to today. But let's keep the question going for now. Adonis from Facebook asked a question. He says, I only play the key of F sharp. How do I become good in all 12 keys? I guess that's what he's asking. And this is a question that I get asked a lot. Just as a question I answered before, how to develop speed, you have to approach it deliberately and consistently, we don't just learn all 12 keys if you never attempt to play in all 12. And so progression practice needs to be something that you do on a regular in all 12 keys. I have a great course over at pianolessonswarren.com where I teach basic progressions and basic chords in all 12 keys. And you practice those as a regiment. So you might get up today and you say, I'm gonna play 1, 6, 2, 5 in the key of C. You go to F, you do the same thing. Go to B flat, do the same thing. And you go through all 12 keys. I have this laid out in a more of a manageable system, so you don't sit there trial and error trying to figure it out. Because part of doing this is we're trying to use the same fingerings and the same voicings when we're practicing this progression, so it's easier to memorize. But it's certainly something that should become one of your biggest priority. If you can't play in all 12 keys, forget about passing chords, forget about re-harmonization, forget about substitutions and speed and all that. Make the ability to play in all 12 keys a priority for 2023. It's not as hard as you think. It does take consistent work and practicing, but the thing is, once you know it, you know it. Once you learn how to play in all 12 keys, you don't have to keep trying. Once you get there, you're done, right? When I have to play in a key, I don't have to think about it anymore. A long time. You know, this is a skill I learned from early, that you got to be key proficient, right? So once you get it done, you don't have to keep doing these exercises. But it's definitely one of the most important things. Forget about the transpose button. If you have a transpose button on your keyboard, cover it with a duct tape or masking tape or something. But don't fall into the trap utilizing this transpose thing. It's a trap that's just going to set you up for failure. Barlow says, can you show how to make drop 2 chords and play a 7, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1? If I'm being honest, drop 2 is not something I use in my playing. It's just not something I do. The theory of drop 2 simply means you put the, what's the theory again? The second highest note, and you drop it from the left hand to the right hand, right? Or, no, actually, it's the other way around. So the second highest note in the chord, you drop it to the left hand. So a 1, 6, a 7, 3, 6, 2, 5 becomes 7, 7, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. So you're basically just, in this case, if you're using triad, the third becomes the base of the chord. It's a cool technique, especially for harmonization and, you know, moving stuff along the keyboard. But it's not a technique that I've really gotten into over the years. So I'm not the best person to demonstrate a lot of this stuff. And part of why I don't use a lot of drop 2, or I never really cared for it, is because I was trained as a solo pianist, which means when you've been trained as a solo pianist, you always carry the bass. When you get comfortable carrying that bass line, you just don't really think much about drop 2s. Like I said, it's something definitely cool and interesting, and I've seen guys who have really become, you know, like Corey Taylor from Skilled Musicians. I think probably Daquan's probably do some stuff like that. Sean Wilson, you guys probably know these guys. They do a lot more of that stuff than I do. So I don't think I'm a best source for drop 2, my brother, unfortunately. Question from Cyril says, how can I use, oh, another drop 2. Just talk about that. Question from Josephat says, when Peace Like a River is also a funeral song, just a reminder. Oh, yes, that's a good one. That's a good one. Thank you. You can post it below that video, Josephied, because eventually I'm going to try to do another video on popular funeral songs you guys should know. Question from Facebook says, do you have any technique for soloing? When it comes to soloing, it's not really, you need technique in general to do anything on the piano, scale, runs, whatever. But when it comes to soloing or improvisation, it's not really technique that you're looking for. You're looking to understand melodies. Soloing is really built on melodic licks and riffs. So those are what you want to work on. To get a nice, long, extended solo, you first need to learn how to develop little licks, like. So it might seem like I'm doing all these runs, but I'm really thinking small melodic licks, and I'm just connecting those melodic licks. That's a really big topic, the topic of improvisation, because it requires you to have a pretty good understanding of a variety of topics. Understanding how to weave melodies from chords, having a good sort of a scale understanding of passage, good understanding of rhythm, because you got to understand part of why some improvisation sounds so cool is what they're doing rhythmically with their lines. And then understanding target notes and a bunch of stuff. I really want to do some videos on improvisation in the future. But yeah, that's going to take a minute. Emerald from Facebook saying, my name is Emerald, I play in the key of C. How can I change the atmosphere in church? I mean, how you can uplift people. So it sounds like you're talking about how to play worship chords. There's a lot of ways to approach this. It all depends on kind of like what you're trying to achieve, you know. A big part of worship chords is the type of sound you're using. I don't think worship chords are done well with just straight piano. You need to have something mixed with that piano, or some pads or some strings or something. So that's the first place I would start. But then also there are certain types of progression that evoke that sort of worship sound. I can do some demonstration for you. Let's check this out, you know. So all I'm doing is 1 to the 2 dominant, but still keep that 1. That's a good progression. To the 4, still keep that bass, the 1. To the 4 minor. I'm making this up right now. So 1. To the 2 dominant with the 1 in the bass. To the 4, the 1 in the bass still. 4 minor. Back to the 1. See that? Simple progression. Now, depending on your skill level, you can start weaving some lines in that. Go to the flat 6, flat 7, flat 6, flat 7, Back to that major 2. And this progression really comes from praise is what I do, praise is what I do. So that's just some ideas. If I have time, I can come up with a lot more of this stuff, but that's one way you can do it. You can really start lifting the atmosphere. So one of the things I find that works well with this is mixing the modes. Because what I was doing right here is really kind of just mixing the major and the minor mode parallel. So I was mixing C major with C minor. And I find when you mix modes a lot like that, pulling chords from mode to mode, it really gives you that atmospheric lift. I can take one more question. Let's take Chris. Chris says, how important or not important is it to learn how to read music? Great question. Great question to end on. I would say if you want to become a professional musician, no doubt you should learn how to read music. If you have zero interest in becoming a pro, like if you're learning music just for your own entertainment, enjoyment, or you're learning music just to be able to get better at playing in church, there's an argument to be made here that you don't need to learn reading music. And lastly, I would say being able to read music is an asset. It's not something that's going to make you less of a musician. It is something that's going to make you better. It's kind of like the ability to speak different languages. For people who can speak multiple languages, it's always an asset. So if you can speak English and French, Spanish and French, or whatever, it's always an asset. My wife's Puerto Rican, she speaks fluent Spanish. It's an asset. When we go to places where it's only Spanish-speaking folks, she can communicate with them. I can't. I got to sit there and just like waiting for her to translate for me. It put me at a disadvantage, right? Honestly, oftentimes I wish I could speak a second language because so many people come to me and say, hey man, could you translate the tutorial into French? If I could speak French, I could just translate it or shoot videos in French. I can't because I don't speak that language. And so it's the same thing. Playing by ear is like learning another language. Playing by sheet music is like learning another language. I can do both because I'm formally trained. So I'm an asset. So if I go to a rehearsal and they say, this is an original song, there's no recording of it, but we have the sheet music, that's fine. I can take the sheet music and learn the song. If I couldn't read music, then I'm screwed. I have to wait for someone to record the song, then for me to learn it, right? And so learning to read music is always an asset, but it's important for you to take note of your own interests, because trying to learn by ear and learn by notes, it's a lot of work, I'm telling you. And so you got to look at your own life and say, is this something I want? Is it something that I can see benefiting me in the future based on my interests? And if it's not, then don't, because it's going to take a lot of time. So I don't want to sit here and tell people don't learn music. It's an asset, but you have to see if it's something that's beneficial for you. There's a reason why I don't teach sheet music or anything reading music on this channel, even though I'm very good at it, because that's not the problem I want to solve. The problem I want to solve is teaching people how to play by ear. So I strategically don't teach anything by notes because that's not the problem I want to solve. For people who want to learn to read notes, there's plenty of online resources and channels that does that. Not me, because that's not something I want to solve. And so that's why a lot of people who join my channel and join my program, they're very good readers, but they want to learn how to play by ear. So it's not about if it's important or not. You got to look at your own thing. What do you want out of this? What's your future for learning music? Is it just for fun, entertainment? Does your church do anything note reading related? Because if it doesn't, learning to read music, it's not going to be an asset for the church because they don't do anything with notation. So those are just some things to think about. All right? Okay, folks. Unfortunately, we're going to have to stop there today. We've been online now an hour and 20 minutes, so I think I've met my quota. That's about on average how long I wanted to stay online. This is a pleasure to talk with you guys as always. Like I said, I'm going to try to do at least one live stream a month where I sit here and ask questions like that. But I also want you guys to know that my inbox is always open. So, you can reach me through email from the website. You can comment down below my videos if you have questions. I always try to provide answers within reason, right? So you can't ask me a tutorial worthy question in a chat below YouTube and expect me to answer. But short little questions that I can easily respond within a paragraph or so, I'm always open to those questions. But sometimes people might inbox me and they'd be like, how do I use passing chords in my song? That's such a vague and deep question. That's not something I can just answer through a chat, right? But you can ask me more simpler questions, and I'll definitely try to answer those for you. And lastly, before we close out, if you guys haven't checked out Piano Lesson with Warren yet, I would highly recommend you do so. For some people, it might not be the right platform, and that's completely okay. But just based on the questions that I get from a lot of you, pianolessonwithwarren.com would be a great place for you. Part of learning music fast and accelerating quickly is if you don't have to waste time guessing and practicing things that's never going to help you. Knowing the things that you're missing and being able to get to the heart of that right away is what's going to help you to grow fast. I talked about a lot that, I'm 38 years old now, but I really started music formally at 19 years old, 18, 19. And by the time I was 26, I was considered a pro player between 19 and 26. I probably became pro before that. But the point I'm trying to make, the reason I was able to excel from a complete beginner to, a very good pianist at 26 is because I had teachers, I had tutelage. I didn't waste time trying to scroll YouTube to learn everything I needed. I was able to get to the heart of the problem, what I need to work on, how I need to work on it, and how to progress. And so that's what I provide for you guys. If you've been struggling for a while and you need help, that means you need tutelage. And Piano Lesson with Warren, you guys know what I offer already because you've been watching my YouTube videos. I just do that with a lot more detail and structure and guidance and materials. And again, it's a community over there that's going through the same thing, so you're not alone. So it's time to make a decision. Do you want to make real progress or not? Because if you need to, and if you want to make real progress, you simply need a tutor. You need a program, you need structure. You need to know what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. And you're going to find that with that, you're going to be able to excel a lot faster because you're not wasting time on things that don't matter, right? Because if you've never had a real tutor or you really don't know how to do this, you're kind of grasping at straws and you don't know if you're practicing something incorrectly, if you're practicing the correct thing. There's so many unknowns. And those are the guessing game that I solve for you over at pianolessonwithwarren.com. Okay? So again, thank you for watching. For those of you who are new to the channel, I have over 500 videos here on YouTube, so there's still a lot you can milk from those videos. Check those out. We're going to be trying to do one live stream at minimum every month, all right? So you guys have a wonderful week, and we will talk soon. Bye for